financing, Yugoslavia fell into the throes of hyperinflation even before the final dissolution. Particularly conducive to hyperinflation was the war involvement of Serbia and Montenegro, which led to the imposing of economic sanctions by European Community in November 1991 and United Nations in May 1992 and April 1993. Hyperinflation was also fueled by internal political and social instability due to authoritarian regime, the stop-go economic policy, a high budget deficit and monetary expansion, the absence of economic transition, as well as the intention of the political oligarchy to redistribute the national wealth. Regardless of the circumstances of the war, the government in Belgrade did not decide to introduce a war economy or increase taxes, but to finance the most of the expenses with the loans of the National Bank. Soon, many negative financial and economic phenomena appeared, such as high growth of the foreign exchange rate, speculative banks based on the low Ponzi scheme, further intrusions into the monetary system, and the growth of shadow economy, which amounted 30% in 1992 and 35% of GDP in 1993. The increase of prices of goods became a common occurrence. Consumer goods came in short supply as of early 1992, when the government of Serbia limited the circulation of key food products, creating a monopoly over products that were in sufficient supply. This spurred speculative trade of merchants close to the authorities who began to make fortunes. Soon thereafter, a connection was established between authorities and criminal structures. In February 1992, monthly inflation reached a hyperinflationary level and it continued to rise. The wheels of price growth were oiled by UN sanctions, but also by the decisions of the authorities who were convinced in the short duration of the international blockade. It was believed that the sanctions would not last longer than the end of 1992, and that it was important to preserve economic resources at all costs, especially export-oriented enterprises. The key, and sometimes the only source of such financing, was the primary issue. Thus, expansive monetization became the most powerful generator of hyperinflation. Already in the first quarter of 1992, 96% of the budget deficit was financed from the primary issue. Attempts by the National Bank to reduce the primary money were thwarted by the decisions of the Assembly and the executive authorities, and already in May 1992 it was possible to spend the entire annual primary issue. In the meantime, economic activity contracted more and more. GDP, industrial production, employment, personal and investment consumption decreased, while the trade, balance of payments, deficit prices, money supply and the cost of living increased. Due to the decline in economic activity and the growth of the shadow economy, less and less tax revenue followed into the budget. The circulation of goods and money increasingly left shops and banks and moved to the streets. Already in June 1992, monthly inflation exceeded 100% and the government announced decisive measures. In July, the dinar was denominated at a ratio of 1 to 10, but this event revealed a new form of abuse. Part of the new banknotes would find their way to the street market before the official release into circulation. It was joint activity of the authorities, state banks and street dealers. The black market took role of the regulator of foreign currency, economic and financial flows, while the black market exchange rate of the German mark became the principal parameter for defining economic behavior. The German mark became the main measure of value and the only safe asset to which the dinar should be converted as soon as possible. The central bank began revising the official exchange rate with increasing frequency, but each change was followed by a new rise in the black market exchange rate. Due to inflexible exchange rate policy, not only did the population give up the official market, but companies and banks also did business using the black market exchange rate. This had a double effect on the hike in prices, as they integrated the assumed exchange rate first and then also the actual one. The economy suffered strong consequences of hyperinflation. In 1992, the GDP decreased by 28.6% and in 1993 by 30.8%, and the manufacturing industry by 23.4% and 38.1%. Investment, trade balance and deployment dropped considerably, but public consumption increased by as much as 32% of GNP in 1993. In 1993, the price growth index measures 116,000 billion, and the cost of living index 222,000 billion. Budget revenues equaled 40% of GDP in 1991 and only 50% in 1993, while the deficit rose from 18 to 28% of GDP. Foreign exchange reserves constantly decreased from around $3.8 billion in 1991 to less than $1 billion at the end of the hyperinflation, with the bulk of reserves held in foreign banks, unavailable to the domestic authorities. Characterized by high bank liquidity, Yugoslav hyperinflation enabled extremely high credit activity, leading to a huge multiplication of loans and a further increase in the money supply. Due to a lack of transparency in the banking system, a significant portion of the primary issue did not flow into loans, and by the end of 1992, bank liquidity was twice as high as projected. Although the National Bank disagreed with the government's monetary actions, it was unable to resist them and actually participated in a process that intensified hyperinflation. Hyperinflation strengthened in the second half of 1993 after printing money worth 950 million German marks for the purchase of VAT and foreign currency. At the same time, after a period of freeze, the controls were lifted and the prices exploded. In a short time, the primary issue grew from 15 to more than 25% of GDP. At the end of 1993, a structural break occurred and the hyperinflation in a self-generating phase. In December 1993, the monthly inflation rate amounted 178,000%. The foreign currency gained the absolute power and the monetary system collapsed. The impact of hyperinflation on the population was strong. In conditions of daily price change, the last savings reserves were exhausted. People were forced to search for groceries, to wait in lines for bread, to engage themselves in smuggling, and to face the worthless banknotes of enormous nominal values. And of course, around 10 billion German marks shifted from the impoverished population into the hands of inflationary or war profiteers. The average wage was sharply losing value in January 1994. Average salaries were worth 30 German marks, and the lowest were only 5 to 10 marks. At the same time, the cost of consumer basket amounted to 16 average salaries. Many ended up in the brink of hunger or literally starved. Hyperinflation pushed the dinner out of use, and the prices were expressed in conditional units, coupons, which were equivalent to the German marks. The price in January 1994 reached 330 million % monthly. The prices were rising 2% an hour, doubling at every 33 hours and 50 minutes. The financial system crash made authorities abandon hyperinflationary policy, and an expert team prepared a program for reconstruction, and then at 24 January 1994, hyperinflation was curbed virtually overnight as a result of a sharp monetary restrictiveness and convertibility of dinar. Okay, last sentence. Hyperinflation left severe and long-lasting legacy. Commercial banks collapsed, and after a few years of them, all of them ended up in the bankruptcy of liquidation. Production and trade enterprises failed because they were forced to operate under unfavorable conditions, leading them to accumulate debt far exceeding the value of their assets. and a group of very enriched participants in the informal economy emerged at the expense of the extremely impoverished middle class. Finally, hyperinflation left an indelible mark on literature, even poetry, on film, on different cultural activities, but also on people's memories, which explain a part of the distrust towards the domestic currency that remains to nowadays. Thank you very much.